And with that horrible reality front of mind, we're starting to learn the ways in which the Trump administration failed in its response to that deadly flooding. According to an eye-opening new report, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, the person ultimately in charge of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, delayed the federal response to that deadly flooding for more than 3 days, even as local search and rescue teams raced to find survivors. As you probably have noticed, Kristi Noem has been the center of a number of stories we've reported on, like the nearly 300 people the administration renditioned to a notorious prison in El Salvador, or the National Guard and Marines dispatched to the streets of L.A. and their show of force there, or the militarized ICE raids scooping up your neighbors across the country, or ICE agents arresting a U.S. senator and New York City controller. And throughout all those very serious stories, she has weirdly acted much more like a social media influencer than a cabinet official. She has spent the bulk of her time dressing up, staging political stunts for social media, like the time she dressed like a firefighter during a training drill in Alaska, or the time she wore a life preserver for a photo shoot with the Coast Guard, or when she put on an ice vest and grabbed a gun to record a video for social media, or this infamous image of her posing in front of detainees at that mega prison wearing a $50,000 watch. Kristi Noem is one of the most powerful people in the U.S. government. She has a profoundly important job and responsibility, and her tenure has been enormously destructive through the intentional dismantling of so much about the fabric of this country, but particularly our emergency disaster response infrastructure, which is, of course, critical to disasters like the flooding in central Texas. Now, back in June, there's a somewhat little noticed item. We learned about a new policy from the secretary, which, get this, required her direct approval of any DHS contract worth more than $100,000. At the time, lots of folks pointed out how absolutely ludicrous that policy was. One outlet, a federal news network, called it, quote, absolutely nuts in a headline. The Daily Kos warned that Noem's DHS disaster could wreck FEMA. I mean, we're talking about an agency that routinely spends billions of dollars on disaster relief. $100,000 is pennies in comparison to what FEMA needs to be able to spend quickly. It was obvious to anyone that knows anything about disaster relief that requiring the secretary's personal approval would create an enormous bottleneck and delay in a situation where time is of the essence. That is exactly what happened. According to a new report citing multiple FEMA sources, Secretary Noem did not sign off on deploying the agency's urban search and rescue team to Texas until this Monday, more than 3 days after the flood struck. Now, you might be wondering what Secretary Noem was doing over that holiday weekend. It turns out on Sunday, one day before finally signing off on the FEMA funding, as search and rescue efforts were frantically ongoing on the ground there and the clock was ticking to find survivors, Noem did take the time to go to Instagram to generate some audience engagement. Quote, which one do you like for the official governor's portrait to hang in the South Dakota State Capitol? Thank you, David Ewell. Which portrait of herself should be displayed in her old capital? This portrait of Noem on horseback? Or this portrait of Noem on horseback? Or perhaps this portrait of Noem on horseback? When pressed about this reporting on Fox News, Secretary Noem didn't exactly deny it.
CNN is basically got a report accusing you of slowing the process. Would you like to respond to that?
Well, there you go. Fake news. CNN, again, is absolutely trash what they are doing by saying that, because our Coast Guard, our Border Patrol, BORTAC teams were there immediately. Every single thing I was on, they asked for, we were there.
Well, that's not a denial, right? Because it was the search and rescue teams at issue, and it wasn't that they were denied authorization. It's that it came 3 days late. Noem probably doesn't need to worry about her job. I would worry about my own conscience, actually. But she doesn't need to worry about her job. Her boss thinks she's doing a, how would we call it, a heck of a job, to coin a phrase. In fact, her boss just spoke to NBC News' Kristen Welker about it. We don't have a recording, but here's the transcript of what he said when Welker asked, there are these reports that have come out that Secretary Noem, I guess, had to have signed off on FEMA expenditures, and they may have delayed some of the response. Trump responds, quote, I don't know anything about it. We were right on time. We were there. In fact, she was the first one I saw on television. She was there right from the beginning, and when she would not have needed anything, she had the right to do it, but she was literally the first person I saw on television that morning when we all woke up and saw this tragedy that took place during the evening, and she was right on the ball. She's done a great job. She was on TV, so obviously she's doing a great job, right? So good of a job, in fact, that this week she canceled, listen to this, she canceled a $3 million grant that was dedicated to attempting to create a kind of state-of-the-art system that would be able to warn local communities quickly when extreme weather arrives, including in sort of granular detail about which specific areas might be subject to the highest risk. That is even though just a couple of days ago she conceded that our infrastructure is in need of an upgrade in order to give folks adequate warning ahead of natural disasters.
We know that everybody wants more warning time, and that's why we're working to upgrade the technologies that have been neglected by far too long to make sure that families have as much advance notice as possible.
Well, they didn't have as much advance notice as possible, and the grant that was studying how to do it, you just canceled. The thing is, Secretary Noem fundamentally believes that the federal government, and by extension herself, doesn't manage federal disasters. So, not our problem. We as a federal government don't manage these disasters. The state does. We come in and support them. And that's exactly what we did here in this situation. New Jersey.
Should make you angry. I know it makes you angry, but it should make every person angry because there was a clear failure here. Again, there's a difference between saying it's entirely someone's fault, and in that case, that's not fair. It's actually not fair to Trump or Noem to say this is 100% their fault. These things happen, like major natural disasters happen. They're happening in part because of climate change, and certainly Trump has made that problem worse, but he's not the only one who's done that, right? That's been generations of governments around the world, blah, 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 blah. Nonetheless, you're the commander-in-chief, and you picked Christina, whatever the hell her name is, the lady who took out her own dog, right? You picked her to be the gal in charge with dubious qualifications, right? And you were warned that she wasn't a good person for the job, and you were basically picking her because she's a loyal sycophant, and you were rewarding her, and rewarding the MAGA base by picking MAGA, and you knew this was going to happen. And again, as we've been saying and others have been saying, it is not politicizing it, guys. I need to make that clear. It's not politicizing a tragedy to talk about it when people are actually paying attention. That is the smart and prudent thing to do, because this is not going to be the last flood. It's not going to be the last time there's a hurricane, flood, earthquake, tornado, any kind of major natural disaster. And when those events come, you want to prevent the next one. And the best time to remind people is when it's happening and in the immediate aftermath. And right now, Donald's proven he can't do the job.
And listen, I understand you're from the region as well, Brian. It's got to be tough on you and with whom you're working. How challenging is that for you and your teams? It's got to be difficult. You're in this position. You're trying to help residents, help first responders as well, do their job. But these residents, it was described by our previous guest, Tony, these families face a reality that they never dreamed of happening. How do you work through these conditions?
The biggest thing that I've seen, I've talked to a lot of the people that have been, that lost, either family members or loved ones, or that lost their property, lost their homes, lost their cars, lost everything that they had ever had. And the biggest thing that I'm hearing from all of them is that they want to move forward, that we want closure from this in a way to where it's not about what happened, but it's about what we can do to make sure that this doesn't happen again. That's the biggest thing that this community wants. And I can tell you that as a member of it. And as somebody who's been impacted by it personally, I have a 7-year-old daughter. So every time I see those girls' faces who unfortunately passed, I see my daughter's face on their bodies. And, because of it being so personal to me with the location, with having that daughter, I have to step away as much as I can to make sure that I keep my mental health, up to speed and my physical health up to speed. And that's what, another thing that this organization does great is we provide psych services for everybody. We're providing IV therapy for people who need it if they're getting dehydrated. Whatever it is that we can do to make sure that these families get the closure that they need, we're absolutely willing to do it.
Well, you're to be applauded given what you're facing on a personal note emotionally as well. But Ryan, I'm curious if the full scale of this devastation has become apparent. And how does it compare with other disasters you've seen? Is this pretty much the worst thing you've seen?
This is, to be honest with you, I couldn't imagine seeing anything worse. If there is something worse, I wouldn't want to see it with my own eyes. This is enough for one lifetime for me. There's one of the guys that I'm working with on this project, who's, I guess, the guy that I report to, he's done 118 appointments, and he told me he'd never seen anything like this. I mean, it's a 80 to 100 mile strip of river, a mile wide. So it's not localized. It's spread out everywhere. And every 25 yards, there's a different obstacle that you have to get through. That's not the same obstacle over and over again. It's every single one is a different one. Right now we're pumping water out of a reservoir just so we can get to these things and get to these cars, get to possible victims, get to whatever it is that we're going to find. But we have to check there. And so the obstacles we're up against are endless.
When you think about rebuilding that area, your home area, can you envision it? I mean, will it take forever? Should it be rebuilt? I mean, you have to ask that question, being so close to the river.
That's not a question you can ask. That you cannot say should. Never could you ask that. 100% we will rebuild. This place will be the place that it was before in no time at all, because the state of Texas, the United States, has come together for this community. We have volunteers from all over the country donating their time, their equipment, their love, everything that they have in their soul, they are donating to this community. So it won't be tomorrow, but it will be soon that this community is on its way to healing.
You know what? I believe you.
Rebuild.
I believe you.
There's not a doubt in my heart that we will rebuild.
With someone like you helping to do the rebuilding, Ryan Logue, it'll get done. And I want to thank you so much for your time. You stay strong.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
He wants closure. And look, for the people on the ground, I know it's not about the partisan politics, but decisions made by people who make way more money than them, who have way more influence than them, who make more money now, but you serve in politics and then you go get some 7-8 figure job basically serving the billionaire class, or you're Donald Trump and you're doing it all to enrich yourself and your family through massive multi-billion-dollar grifts, right? Those people are making decisions that will risk your life as a first responder and everyone in your community, who includes you and your family if you live where you're rescuing. And so I think you put partisan politics aside and say, even if you voted for Trump, it's like his failures have real tangible impacts. This isn't you voting nebulously on the bad people are coming into my country and it makes me unsafe. It's the bad guy is in the White House and he just made me unsafe through his neglect.